Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the United Stand. No transfer show this morning because we've got Fabrizio Romano on at just after 1 o'clock live. But I'm joined by Paul Ince this morning to discuss the weekend, all the fallout about all this Pogba stuff. We'll talk about some of the Leeds chants at the weekend as well, and a generally good weekend for United. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Buongiorno, Marky. I'm okay. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. I mean, I thought the weekend was absolutely fantastic. First of all. You watched the game yourself. 5-1. Was that a shock? Not necessarily the win, but the way in which we won. Absolutely. Well, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, listen. I think you go back to last season when Leeds went to Old Trafford, and they got a pummeling. So as far as that, as far as I'm concerned, that wasn't actually a shock. Obviously, when they went back to Ellen Road last week, Leeds managed to get a draw. But for me, it was like the perfect storm for me, Mark. It really, really was. And the fans were back. The electricity, the energy. All the excitement that you want by having like Old Trafford packed. It was just a great sight to see. I mean, we've always said before how important fans are to the game. In fact, the fans are the game. But to just see a packed Old Trafford.
How important is that, Paul? Just to jump in, because I'll forget. Like if you think about it last season, and you played for United over 200 times, if you had to play a few games last year in an empty stadium, and then your first game back is Leeds at home in front of 75,000, what's the difference in that? Because we can imagine it as fans, but what's the difference in an empty stadium and then 75,000 at Old Trafford? Is that going to make you play in a different way?
It should do, and it can do. It can work one or two ways. And I touched on this before. When you play for Manchester United, the expectations from the fans, you have to win every game. You have to play well every game. Listen, I think the fans understand that that's not always the case, but that's the expectation. This is Man United. This is the standards that we set. So we have to perform week in and week out. And you saw maybe before lockdown that when the fans were at Old Trafford, United struggled at home. They did against Burnley, against Villa. They struggled because they couldn't cope with the pressure of the Manchester United fans because of the expectations that they put up on the team. So in a kind of perverse kind of way, when there was no fans in there, it was probably easier for them last season. And I was always interested to see what they're going to be like in a full-packed Old Trafford stadium. Because it's like playing in a practice game when you're on a Thursday afternoon before you play on the Saturday. There's no fans, there's no silence, you can hear everyone talking, there's no atmosphere. And, that spurs you. When you've got fans on your side, they're like the 12th man, Marky. And if there's no one there, it must be so hard. Listen, I can imagine you can get used to it after 10, 15, 20 games. But, the first one or two games, I'm not sure I could deal with that. So to hear the crowd singing, Saturday lunchtime, to hear the electricity coming out of Old Trafford, they were glad to be back. I think the players were glad to have him back, and I think they both kind of spurred each other on to put in that performance that they did. And everything was right. As I said, it was a perfect storm. You're playing a Leeds team who, under Bielsa, are very open. And, every time Leeds play against a team, it's an open game just because of the way Leeds play. But they haven't got the quality that Manchester United have got, and they just fell right into Manchester United's hands, and it was a great performance. I mean, it was attacking football. It was a very good game, and I think all the Man United fans went away happy. I don't think, looking at it, I don't think there was one player who I was disappointed with. I think even fucking Fred scored. You know what I mean? That's even Fred got a goal. That's it. That's it. Fred scores. That's like Gary Pallister scoring, against Blackburn. When we beat them 3-1, when we won the title for the first time. Everything was just perfect, and it was a great game.
I think it's we'll talk about that midfield in a minute, but yeah, I agree. I think as well, when you think about it, just thinking there, Leeds probably have never played in front of 75,000 people. A lot of those, they were newly promoted last year in an empty stadium. I do want to ask you about Paul Pogba, because I know I don't really understand it because I'm not an ex-player. I'm not in the media like yourself, and Paul Pogba does seem to generate with a lot of people a bit of I don't know what the word is. I mean, certainly I think in relation to Souness, bitterness. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it because there was a bit of a debate going on last night. Two things said by Graham Souness. One, he was asked about the 4 assists by Pogba, and he said, well, that's what you should get from £100 million player, which, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong, but Grealish didn't do anything, did he? And then the second thing is that, Gary Neville and Souness were sort of, Harry Kane, you can understand why he leaves. And then Mika Richards is saying, yeah, but you two are going in on Pogba all the time because he wants to leave. Well, that's because he's telling his agent to do it. Do you, as a player yourself, as an ex-United player, funnily enough, Pogba's only just gone past your appearance record. He's just gone to 207. So that's how long he's been at the club now. And yet he still can't get that. He still divides so much. Do you think that criticism is now becoming a bit obsessive from people like, Souness and everybody else?
Listen, I think Pogba's probably, especially under Mourinho, has never really adhered himself to the Manchester United fans. I think it's always been divided in his performances, and obviously all the stuff that's come out with his agent saying he wants to leave. And as much as it is his agent who's saying these things, Pogba's got to have control of his agent. His agent just can't come out and say things and put Pogba in the shit. Pogba must know what he's going to come out and say. So I think, maybe previously he's not really adhered himself to the Old Trafford fans. And the only way he's going to do that is by putting in performances like he did on Saturday. Listen, he is, on his day, a world-class player. When you play for Man United and you do cost that amount of money, you've got to play well every week, because if you don't, there's always going to be someone out there ready to criticise you, ready to find faults in you, ready to find weaknesses in you. There was no weaknesses with Pogba on Saturday. He was immense. And as much we can talk about Fernandez's hat-trick, Paul Pogba was by far the best player on the park. We need to see that more. We need to see that week in and week out. Seeing it once a game, twice a game, 3 games, 10 games a season is not good enough. As a midfield player, you need to produce that, the majority of time that you play for Manchester United, because that's what we call a Manchester United player, someone who performs week in and week out on a consistency level. And if Pogba can keep producing that form, then you've got a French United have a great we'll get closer to City and Chelsea and Liverpool this year. I think a lot of people are out for Paul Pogba. Maybe he's brought a little bit upon himself previously, but it's a new season. It's a new season. It's a new start. It's a new Manchester United. He was outstanding. Just leave it at that. We don't need Graham Souness to start trying to slaughter him. When he's been outstanding. I don't get it. Pogba only wanted to maybe think about leaving because he didn't see Man United competing with the top sides. Yeah, that's understandable. But Harry Kane wants to leave Tottenham because he wants to win trophies. He's not one of these players who just, I want to stay and earn 200 grand a week. He doesn't want to do that. Yeah, he'll earn that at City and maybe more. But this is someone who's been on loan to the championship teams six or seven times. He's done it the right way. He's not one of those players that you see at Chelsea who stay in under 23s all their lives and pick up big dough, or Arsenal, or all these other big clubs. Harry Kane wants to win trophies, and so you can't blame Harry Kane for leaving. Absolutely, no, he's done his duty at Tottenham. It's been fantastic for Tottenham. Now let the boy go and win trophies wherever he decides to go. And that was the same with Pogba. Pogba, I don't think Pogba saw United taking the right steps where he felt that we could compete in winning trophies. This year, and this is why he's not even signed a contract. That's why he's got a year left. I think that's still open in his mind where he wants to go, or if he wants to stay. But looking at the performance on Saturday, he might have a belief that we are going somewhere, we are competing. We've still got Rashford to come back. We've still got Cavani to come back. Jadon Sanchez didn't start the game. So there's a lot of positives coming out of
Varane as well. Yeah.
Varane. So, we're having a go. And hopefully that might entice Pogba to sign a new contract.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Paul, because it's like, Kane, I understand why Kane wants to go. He wants to win trophies. He's 28. But the thing is, you're right. Pogba wants to go for the same reason. because there's a contract there if he's a mercenary. He can stay at United if he's a mercenary. He wants to go and win things. And the timing of what his agent did just before that game in December was shocking. And he got the criticism for that. But since then, he's kept his mouth shut. We've not heard anything from his agent. He's clearly told his agent to shut up. And that professionalism is there, which is respectful to United and Solskjaer. Let's see what happens this season. And I'm with you. I think, these pundits who clearly have an issue, and maybe their issue is if they're so frustrated that, they're retired. It's not nice when you're retired. And when they were playing well every week. And they probably can see in Pogba a good player there, but they probably just don't like his inconsistency, maybe. I don't know.
But listen, I think you've got to kind of look at it this way, and you've got to think, wait a minute, when Pogba goes and plays for France, he's a completely different player. And all the people have said is, why does he not play for United like he does for France? Well, because really the issue behind that is that he was playing with better players playing in the French team.
Yeah,
that's the big. When you're playing with like Verratti and you're playing with Kante, these are world-class players. No disrespect. When you're playing in the team with Fred and McTominay, it's difficult. It can be difficult for him. And that's what Man United were. They were a team in transmission, and Pogba was at the helm of that. And it's difficult. We go back to our team. We had very good players in our team. Everyone was a very good player. It's easy to play. It was easy for me to play. When I've got Keane alongside me, or Robson, or Giggs in Beckham, it was easy for me to play. That wasn't the case with Man United the last 2 or 3 years because they've been building. But now you're seeing, as you said, top players coming in. He's playing with better players, and hopefully that gives him the belief that United can go forward and start competing because he is a world-class player. And as I said, there's been a lot of issues. People don't understand sometimes what goes on after the game. What goes through Pogba's head, what goes through a player's head. And I think there was a stage where he didn't feel comfortable at Old Trafford. He didn't know what reaction he'd probably get for the fans when he played or when he didn't play. There was times where he was stuck on the bench. You can't have £100 million player stuck on the bench. Don't make sense to me. So everything was inconsistent in his whole life, And then obviously you got all the social media stuff that he was doing. It was a calamity, Now it's you're right, Marky. It looks like he's knuckled down for one reason or the other. He's either playing to get a move next year, or he's playing because this is his last year and he wants to win things, or he's playing because he wants to get a new contract. But he can sign a new contract. The contract's there for him to sign. Whether he does that in January, I don't know, because we know come January he can start talking to other clubs in Europe. So there's a lot of things going on in his mind, but he has to just focus on his football. And sometimes you're right, Mikey, when people come out and want to slaughter him for no reason, I don't like that. Just hold your hands up to listen. He was world class today. Best player in the park. We need to see that week in, week out if we're going to compete with the big boys.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is the line, isn't it? He was fantastic. Give him the praise. Let's see if he can do it against Southampton, Wolves, and the rest of the games. Talking about the midfield, that is the area that still generates the most debate. We beat Leeds, but we beat Leeds 6-2 before Christmas with Fred and McTominay. They seem to play very well against Leeds. It's obviously the way Leeds play suits them. That is an area everyone's worried about. I was just doing a little bit of research, and I was looking at that final season for you where we should have won the double and we lost to Everton in the FA Cup and we lost to West Ham final day. You played in a midfield three with Roy Keane and Nicky Butt. Now, Roy Keane was 24 and Nicky Butt was only 20 at the time. Now, Roy Keane's the same age as Scott McTominay now. Now, I'm not going to ask you to compare Roy Keane and Nicky Butt to Fred and McTominay, but you watched Fred and McTominay and you played with Roy Keane and Nicky Butt. In that midfield, that was a Premier League winning midfield. You, Nicky Butt and Roy Keane, whether it was 95 when you didn't, but the previous years and years ahead of that, that's what it takes to win a midfield. How good, playing with those players, and Fred's 28 and McTominay's 24 and Matic is 32. How do you look at that midfield? Can you win the thing that was being asked a lot by our viewers over the weekend was, we're so good at the back and we're so good at front. Can you carry that midfield? Can that midfield win as a title off the 38 games if it's surrounded by players and they're just workmen?
Well, I think when you use the word workman, it's probably a little bit hard. I think, as I said before, I think McTominay, you always look at him as still being pretty young, but you're right, Marky. I think he's 24, 25 now. And
Played really well on Saturday, though, didn't he? Really, to be fair.
He did. And listen, there was times, as I said before, Mikey, where United were struggling last year, and he was at the forefront of it all. So he's happy to take the responsibility on. But you look at that midfield, and at times against Leeds, they were so open. Against better teams, they get exploited. And we spoke about last week about the holding midfield player. I know you played the two holding midfield players in McTominay and Fred and Pogba played on the left. But at times, Leeds were just cutting through them. There are so big spaces in the middle of the park. You think, where the fuck have they gone? You know what I mean? They're just, from a positional sense, I'm not sure they know what they're doing at times. And that's a worry. That's why I said last week we need a top class holding midfield player. Maybe someone alongside McTominay. Listen, he's still learning the game. McTominay. I think he's got a future.
Could be a late bloomer.
It could be late bloomer, but I think he's always one of them where when I went to Manchester United, I was 21, 22, and I had Brian Robson alongside me when I played in the Winners' Cup final against Barcelona. I was fucking shitting myself, and I had Brian Robson alongside me just to talk me through it, put me in the right positions. I'm not sure McTominay's got that, because once Fernandes goes off and Pogba goes off forward, I think that's a problem for us at that midfield area. So, I still think we need that Kante, we need that Keane, we need one of those players. I'm not sure who's out there. I'm sure they probably know better than I do. But I think if we're gonna challenge, and we need to look at that position and the centre forward, as much as we're scoring 5 goals against Leeds. You're right, Marky. Southampton, Wolves, they're going to be teams like Burnley when they just sit deep and have 10 men behind the ball. We still need that focal point, up front. And I like McTominay. I like Fred. I said I don't dislike Fred. People might think I dislike him, but I don't think he's what we need to get us where we need to get to. I think he's one of them that you probably bring on later in the game, just to shore things up, because he can get around the pitch. But I still think we need to improve that midfield. When you look at the teams that we've had and the Premier League teams that we've had, Scholesy, people like that, we've always had that kind of toughness in the middle of the park. We've always had that kind of strength. We've had all those kind of attributes that you need to run a midfield player and midfield department. And I don't think we're there quite yet. So I'd like to look at something in that position.
In the late 90s, I would say that was probably one of the golden eras of the Premier League, and you certainly played in that, sometimes against some of those Arsenal and United sides, and obviously in the mid-90s and early 90s, you played with those United sides. I always wanted to ask you this, and I think over the weeks we'll talk about, what it was like under Sir Alex, and maybe a bit about the class of 92, and they basically came through while you were there as young lads. But in relation to Roy Keane, he was 24 when you left. You were there when he came into the club. How do you rate Roy Keane as a player? Because you're self-professed governor, whatever. You backed yourself as a really good midfielder, as you were. Do you think when you left, was he on your level? I mean, he definitely went up levels. What was he like coming into the club, around the club? Was he because he was quite young when you were there, and he became almost the new governor after you'd gone. He was the leader, wasn't he? Because Cantona retired a couple of years later. What was he like as a midfielder? Because his game changed as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. But listen, we'll just go back to this self-professed governor a bit, all right? And I want to tell you the story behind it, all right?
Here we go, yeah.
Okay, so I'm a Dagenham boy, all right? Born and bred. So when I was a young kid, we used to hang around in the street corners, drinking, fighting, doing all that type of stuff, okay? And then we used to go up to the snooker hall with all my mates. And every time we hit a good shot or we did something well, someone would shout, "Who's the governor?"
Right.
And we'd say, "I am," or my mate would go, "I am." So one day we were doing a shooting session against Peter Schmeichel. And when Peter Schmeichel was in goal and he was up for it in the shooting session, you couldn't beat him. It was unbeatable, okay? And I hit this shot and I smashed it in the top-hand corner, which is very unlike me. And started running around saying, "Who's the governor? Who's the governor?" And all of a sudden, people start to say it, even when they did something well. And all of a sudden, Brian kids started calling me Gov. And that's exactly how it started. And everyone started calling me Gov. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of rolled on from there. So it wasn't something I said I'm the governor. It was something. It was just something just from my upbringing and where I come from and what we used to do. And it was basically it's like if someone does good. So even if
not a bad nickname to have though. There's worse nicknames.
One, you got to live up to it, but but it wasn't like I am the governor. You know what I mean? It was something to do with how I was brought up, and it was a sign of someone's done well. Even if your little girl passed her 11 plus and she came in and went, oh, who's the girl? And she goes, oh, me daddy. So it was that type of doing well type of stuff. So it cottoned on, and it was a bit of fun. It wasn't no more than that. So that's the story behind it. So we can get that straight. So I want to put that out there so we know what the situation is. Going back to Roy Keane, didn't know about Roy Keane a lot. We knew Brian Robson was coming to, in the end of his career, and I was always. We was all thinking who would come in and replace him. And also the name Keane kept coming up, and we thought, a bit young, seen him at Nottingham Forest. Looks a good player, but very, very young. But as soon as he walks into the club, he had this. You knew he was a Man United player. You knew things. You always hear people say he's not a Man United player or he is a Man United player. You never hear that about any other club. In the Premier League, people say, well, he's a Tottenham player. He's not. It's always a Man United player because of the expectations that we have at Old Trafford. So when Keane walked in, there was a presence about him. For someone so young, it was like, I belong here. This is where I belong. And I love Keane. We had a very good friendship, which is important. And we had a fantastic partnership, and I think people think we were probably similar in the way we played, but he was obviously more the one who was allowed to go forward and score goals. He had a great time of getting in the box and scoring goals and vital goals. He scored the winner against Manchester City at Main Road, when we won 3-2, if you remember, Marky. But he was a world-class player, and he put demands on everyone at such a young age. His leadership qualities you could see coming through. And when you talk about the best midfield players in the world and the best ones that I've played with, Roy Keane's definitely up there. He had absolutely everything. And the fact the longevity he had at Manchester United and the trophies that he won shows how great a player he was. And it was a pleasure to play alongside him.
Do you think you were better than him, Prime? The fact that you're thinking about it is that shows, because you like you say, you as a player, you've got to back yourself. And I've spoken to a few ex-players, and you listen to them, and that's the whole point of being. I wanted to be a footballer, and I've got total respect for anyone who makes it, because it's not just playing for Man United. It's when you're 10, 11, 12, all the battles you have to go through to get there. You've got to back yourself, haven't you? You've got to believe in yourself. That's part of the battle.
Oh yeah, I definitely believe in myself. You don't play for Man United and not believe in yourself. But I would never say that I was a better player than anyone. I leave it for people to decide that. All I know is that Roy Keane was a world-class player, and we kind of made each other better.
Yeah. What
people don't know, even after every game, me and Roy Keane would sit in the change room. Most people would be in the showers or getting ready to go out, or, we'd be sitting in the change room next to each other, and we'd analyse our games. And they'd say, Ince, you could have done better at that. Maybe you should have done that. And we'll have a conversation for 10, 15 minutes, me and Keane, every game. So we pushed each other on. When we played against each other on the five-a-side, and he was up against me. We inspire, we'll have a go at each other, we'll get tackles. So we kind of made each other better players. And that's why we were such a great partnership. We were such a formidable partnership.
I think it's, people talk about we'll talk about the class of 92 in coming weeks, but I think everyone talks about the class of 92 and what a great opportunity they had because they came through and they were nurtured by such leaders. But I actually think Roy Keane probably had a better nurturing, because he came in, was it 93? And he got those 2 years with the team with you and Hughes and Bruce. And I always think about what I loved about that team. And I know a lot of people are too young, but what I loved about the 94 team is that those games against Wimbledon, they were an absolute shit house of a team. And we were better than them. But when you lot used to play them, because you had yourself and Hughes and Bruce and Pallister and Cantona, and obviously Keane was a young player coming through then, it was we'd fight them toe to toe, which not many people could do against Wimbledon. That was their big thing. So we'd more or less beat them, but we'd have to fight them first. I mean, I remember that tackle Vinnie Jones did on Cantona, and of course, I mean, you played in the game where we'll have to talk about this in a few weeks because you were on the pitch when Cantona got sent off. That wasn't Wimbledon, that was Selhurst Park, but the team was it could fight, that team, and what a place for Keane to grow as well as a because it's not just about ability, it's about he obviously took what he learned in those 2 years with all you lot and took it to United for the next 10 years. Yeah,
exactly. Absolutely spot on, Mark. And I think that was the same for me. Going to United in 89, 90 and having 2 years with Brian Robson, and those guys, you learn from them. You learn what it takes. You learn that, the discipline, and the standards that you have to be on and off the pitch. You're always representing Manchester United no matter where you are. And you also learn that there's going to be teams. The Premier League's so diverse and in the way teams play football, and not everyone's going to play like Manchester United or Real Madrid. Some teams you're going to have to go to, you're going to have to battle. Some teams you're going to have to go to, and they're going to try and intimidate you. The likes of Vinnie Jones, the likes of John Fashion, and players like that. When you go to Wimbledon, you know what's in store, and you've got to win the battle. And Fergus always used to say to us, if you don't win the battle, you're going to get turned over there. Because they're going to be horrible, they're going to be nasty, they're going to be in your face, they're going to be late tackles, they're going to be, standing on your feet and elbow, all those things from a mental point of view, you've got to come across and deal with. And, that was always the toughest place to go to, Wimbledon. But once we won the battle, we got the ball down and played, it was a different opposition. Not to say they couldn't play, but they couldn't play at our level. So, learning all those types of things as a player, Kenny would have got that on board when he first came here. We would have told him, about the stories. And sometimes it's about stories. Sometimes it's about experience. And, telling Kenny, listen, this is what happened last year, this happened the year before, this is going to happen this year, make sure you're ready for it. So you're kind of putting it into his head what to expect. And Kenny would have done exactly the same with the next players coming through, the Nicky Butts and people like that. And it's just a domino effect, Marky, you know what I mean? It just rolls on and rolls on. But the thing is, it's changed now. Football's changed now. As you said, back in the day, Wimbledon were characters. They were tough. And, you knew what was going to get, So there's not many characters in the game now. There's not many people flying and early tackles and taking people in the eye anymore. Right. But for Keeney, it was a great learning curve, and he put that into his role as captain.
Football has changed, you're right, and we've spoken about the midfield and how there probably isn't that player in the midfield to sort of develop a McTominay and help a Fred and this, that, and the other. But certainly, looking at the weekend, there is a young player there that I believe has got world-class capability, who is surrounded by quality players, and his name's Mason Greenwood. He played at number 9 at the weekend. He's got Bruno and Pogba near him. Sancho's going to come in. He played as a number 9. He's 19 years of age. I think some people in our fan base weirdly don't rate him, and I'm like, we're constantly linked with Haaland, and you mentioned on the last show about a striker. What do you think about Greenwood? Because you would have played. I mean, look, again, mid-90s, we were awash with so many good strikers, and we've had Shearer, and there are some good strikers about. But you said United need a striker. Mason Greenwood this year, if he can get 10, 20, 30 games up front and score 20 goals, does he solve that United problem for you as a striker? Has he got he is surrounded by a perfect opportunity, and he's growing as a lad, isn't he? He's getting quite big physically as well.
It looks like to me, and I said last week on the show that, bringing Jadon Sancho in, I hope that doesn't stop the growth of Mason Greenwood, because the lad's ultra talented. He's got 2 great feet. We saw him in the Euros last year. He scores goals for fun. He's a natural goal scorer on either side. To see him play up front, I didn't call that one. I couldn't see him playing up front on Saturday, but he's got pace to burn. The goal that he scored, it was a great finish. He's run 40 yards and still got the composure to smash it.
Such a good finish, yeah, wasn't it? It was.
And corner. That's someone who's 19 years of age, and I hope, as I said before, I hope we get to see a lot more of him. As I said, we still got Cavani to come back. He's a natural goal scorer. He's a goal scorer machine. But he's not going to play every game, Cavani. He's the wrong side of 30. So what he's saying to Ollie Solskjaer is, hang back, boss. I can play this role. Give me that opportunity. We've seen it with Rashford. Doesn't work. We've seen it with Martial. doesn't work. So maybe this could be the one where we can give him 10, 15 games. It might be a surprise package for us. We might not have to go out and get a centre forward. You know, because if Man United play the way they played on Saturday, they will create chances and open teams up. And if you open teams up and you've got someone like Greenwood, who we know can finish, then it might be something where we haven't got to go and spend 60, 70 million pounds on a striker. And I just hope that when Cavani comes back and all the big boys, that Greenwood gets game time. Because, listen, you don't spend 70 million pounds on Sancho and not playing. I think that's... So he's got options, Ollie. You know, where's Rashford going to play? Is Martial still going to be there? There's talk about him going, but it looks like he's in Ollie's plans. So he's got options. He's got to pick the right formation. Sometimes it's hard when you've got so many options. Sometimes it's easy when you just go, right, this is the team, this is the team, this is the team. Our team in 92, 93, we played them more or less every week.
Yeah.
You know, Saturday, Tuesday, didn't matter. Now, as the game's changed and the finances have got bigger, you can bring in more top players. But I was pleased with Greenwood. I really, really was. You know, he looks like a smashing kid. Got to keep him grounded. You know, and this is the most important thing. This is where you need the likes of Maguire, you know, people like that, you know, to just keep them grounded on the floor. You know, don't get carried away. You know, just keep doing what you're doing. And I think that was a good thing. We touched on the class of 92, Mark. And, you know, they came into an environment where they couldn't take the piss. You know, Giggsy, Butty, Neville, Beckham, they couldn't. They were coming to a club with the likes of Robson and big senior players, and they were grounded. They were told what to do. They did it. You know, they didn't get carried away in themselves, and you see the fruits of that. So this is important for people like Greenwood, not to get carried away with himself, keep his feet on the ground, and just keep performing the way he's performing.
Yeah, definitely. It's very exciting. Well, look, Paul, thanks very much for coming on this Monday morning. We'll talk later in the week about changes and everything for the Southampton game, but a very, very good start to the week, to the Premier League, with United. And thank you very much for coming on. Really enjoyed the chat.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure, Marky. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be back later with the Romano interview.